Guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, you've probably seen this guy before. He's been on the show no less than 5 times. I get the honor of having another coffee, another energy drink with my brother, Isaac. Thank you, Celsius Energy, for keeping me powered up for today. Guys, we're going to be talking about how to strategically build your business and build your brand for the next 6 months of 2024. Now, Isaac's been somebody that's, if I have any questions on brand building, building a business, he's the guy that I go to. And he's truly amazing. He's on an amazing podcast tour. I think I've caught so many of his podcasts that he's been on. He's going to be on over 100 coming up soon. So if you don't see him here, you're going to see him everywhere else. Isaac, my brother, welcome to the show.
Richard, thank you for the invitation. And it's amazing to see now that this episode is sponsored. You're moving up in the world as well, just compared to a couple years ago when we did it, when I was building my firm, compared to where we're both at today. It's exciting to share this time with you and this coffee, this good Cafe Bustelo, which I'm not sponsored by, but man, it kicks you in the ass. So it's great.
I love it. Now, me and you, the last couple of years, we've had ups, we've had downs, we've had lows, we've had starts, we've had beginnings. But if somebody would see you now, all the success you're having, they wouldn't realize that you've had a lot of ups and downs, and life hasn't always been sunshines, rainbows, sprinkles, and unicorns. So what is your definition now of resiliency? Because I'm sure it's different than it was just a year ago.
Yeah, and I can tell that you pay attention, because it's not like I'm one of those guys that's like talking about my problems 24/7. And so you're paying attention to those minor details, those posts where I provide hints that things aren't the greatest. Resiliency is really being annoying about success. And by the term annoying, I mean, number one, these problems and these pain points will annoy you, and you have to annoy the problem because you have to be persistent about it. And so I think about the persistence that I've had to have mentally, emotionally, physically, to where you entrepreneurship in business and life comes in waves. This is something I've noticed in myself that everybody else knows, is that you'll have these cycles where you're super motivated, and that's easy to grow. That's easy to succeed. But the times that you're not motivated or that things aren't working out and you're on this downward trend, right? Even if it's temporary, you have to have this resiliency about you to where it doesn't matter. You're still going to press forward, to where even if you get told no, or even if you have to withdraw an offer from a prospect, or even if you have somebody who's causing you issues in your business, you have to make sure that you are resilient and persistent and annoying when it comes to your success. You have to be an annoyance, to where no matter what, you are popping up and you're doing the things that you need to do. And that's a challenge. And that's something that is not optional. It's a requirement.
But even, when I first had you on the show, I think it's been 4 or 5 years ago, the game has changed. Like when I first had you on the show the first time, it was audio only. There was no AI. There was no Opus clip. There was no video. It was just, things have changed. And if you don't know how to pivot, you're going to get your ass run the fuck over. And I've been watching you just in the last year or so. You've had to pivot, and you have had to change courses and up level. So talk about how important it is to be able to pivot and up level, or you're going to get ran over.
Well, there's a massive difference between a lateral pivot and a vertical pivot. And here's what I mean by that. Every time that I was finding a new business and trying a new endeavor, it was this search for clarity. It was this search for, I know that there's something else out there that I might be better at, or that I could do that could be more efficient, better for my skills, and better for my gifts. So it's not like personal brand consulting and MCG Mashman Consulting Group was my first business. It's not like I automatically came out of the gate and had this endeavor. No, I went from network marketing. I went from a clothing line. I went from drop shipping. I went to music management. And I did all these different things in a search for clarity, in a search for something that was better. And those were all vertical pivots, because I basically went up and I said, all right, I'm jumping. It's the same thing as like if you're finding a new career or finding a new position that is higher up in the hierarchy of a company or in your field, you're making a vertical pivot. So you're changing a little bit and you're going higher, right? And I don't even know if pivot would be the proper word when you're making a vertical jump. It's more of a vertical jump. But in 2020, I launched my public relations firm, which is what I was building for 4 years. And that was also the business that I basically got my feet wet heavily, not just in terms of sales and prospecting and how to have conversations and things like that, but I got my feet wet in the back end, the unsexy kind of things, from client refund requests of literal $8,000 to dealing with having all of the legal paperwork and contracts for independent contractors, and how do you send out a 1099 and all of these details that people don't talk about. And that was the business that I was growing until I decided to dissolve that and lead into Mashman Consulting Group. And that was an example of a lateral pivot, because I wasn't rebranding the business, but I was launching a new business off of the back of my old one. Similar business model, similar services, similar provisions, but I made a little bit of a lateral pivot to where I was like, all right, this little pivot here, launching something new, will allow me to literally hit that exponential growth, because I have all of the clarity that I was searching for all of these years.
Okay, but now, let's go back, because I think it's been 4 or 5 years when we had our first talk and talking about how we've pivoted. I mean, back in, this is right before COVID happened. Mm-hmm. Fidget spinners was the hot fucking thing. I mean, remember we were talking about that, and we're like, oh man, people are making so much money. Now, if you have a fidget spinner, people are like, I don't care. You can't sell that shit now. But if people are still trying to sell fidget spinners at this moment in time, and you're not up leveling or getting vertical momentum, then you're going to be screwed. So you have to be able to pivot as the times change, right?
And that's a large part about what I've been about, and what I would encourage people to do too, because there comes a point to where you have to commit to a business, or you have to commit to something, but that doesn't mean that you cannot adapt that business. Because the biggest issue, Richard, is people try something for a year and they give up with it, right? They're like, oh, I did this for 12 months, or I did this for 2 years, and I got to restart over because whatever. And you go through that, I think, for a few years of your life. I think that's a necessity, to try a bunch of things, figure it out, and then you're not going to have everything perfected. So when I launched my firm, or when I launched MCG just a couple months ago, it's not one of these situations where I have the perfection, I have everything down packed. No, but it is that pursuit, knowing that I'm committed to this one business. I'm committed to this endeavor that I'm building. And then it's like the people who go from network marketing company to network marketing company, thinking that they can all of a sudden hit it big. And they don't realize that, no, you need to stick with the one company and scale it up, as long as that's something that has a good quality service, a good backbone, a good product, a good leadership team. Stick with it. And so when you're looking at current trends in the market, it's like, yeah, fidget spinners aren't going to be the hot commodity anymore, and drop shipping might not be the hot commodity anymore, but maybe launching a podcast agency and building that would be something you're good at. Or maybe if you're doing a drop shipping company, right, e-com, you might not be doing fidget spinner sales anymore, but you might be doing a specific, I'm trying to think of what's hot with the kids, but it's like you could go into political t-shirts and literally have a good business there, if you're not building a brand that is like a Nike or an Adidas kind of brand, but you're building, shits and giggles drop shipped items. Yeah, that would be fine. But that takes a degree of risk, and a degree of faith in yourself as well, to go from one thing to the next and then stick to that one thing. And so when I made the decision in my mind, let me dissolve this publicly and launch something new, it was, man, I know that I'm setting myself up to do a lot more work, but this is the best way forward. And life is about all of these different decisions where you are looking for the best way forward.
And one thing I love about you is you never back away from being honest and being accountable. Where, like, I always tell my clients, listen, if you want to start a podcast, put out on your social media, I'm going to start a podcast in 2024. So you're keeping yourself accountable, because once you put something out into the ether, either you do it or you don't do it. But if you have people saying, hey, bro, I remember last month you said you were going to start a podcast. Did you start that yet? So I think, you saying, okay, publicly, I'm making a change. I'm doing something different. I think that takes a lot of balls, but it takes a lot of brains because now you have to be more accountable.
Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back and delete the post and look stupid? It's like saying that a couple months ago, I put out a post on Facebook and I said, I will be on 100 podcast interviews in 2024. And a couple months went by and I'm like, man, I have been so inconsistent the first couple months of 2024 with being on 8 shows a month. Like if I was on 8 shows starting in January, I would not have to be on 20 shows in July, but I'm having to make up for that lost ground and by reestablishing that momentum. And I think, vertical momentum, it's like, this is the perfect show to talk about this is once you have momentum, it's so much easier to keep it than it is to restart it and reestablish it. Now, the beautiful thing, Richard, though, and this goes into personal branding, the great thing about building a strong personal brand is you can reestablish momentum easier than you could have if you were starting over. And so even though I wasn't really promoting Mashman Ventures in my firm for the past year, I launched MCG, and all of a sudden that momentum is back to square one. It's back to where it was when I left it off. And so when you build this name, it's kind of like the artist who doesn't drop any music for a couple of years. And all of a sudden, Rihanna comes out with a new album, it hits number 1, or Eminem, it disappears for a few years and drops a new album, and it's number 1. And that is the testament of a successful personal brand because you're able to go and basically come back like you never left. And when you're building these things and building and putting yourself out there, that honesty is very helpful because it connects people to you and being able to stand on principles. And I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours a couple of days ago, Joseph Graham, and we talked about.
I love you, Joe. I love you, Joe. And guys, if you don't know Joe Graham, the 150K podcast, I think it's the Joe Graham show. You need to know Joe Graham.
And so our conversation's coming out in September around the time this one will come out. And we spent the entire time talking about principles and talking about being, open and willing to, hold yourself to a higher commitment. And you have this personal commitment to yourself. And then by putting yourself out there and saying that I'm doing this, you have the public holding you committed to. Just like a politician getting into office, it's like, if they need to have their own degree of commitment, but the public is also going to hold them to a standard where if they don't perform, they don't get elected again. And it's kind of the same thing with business. It's like you have to do things to where you are getting elected time and time again as the best operator for your business or the best public figure that you can be.
But I think you also have to be consistent. Like Joe Graham had a podcast, and I've been on his shows, the 150K podcast, and now he switched over to the Joe Graham show. But if he stopped talking about sales and then all of a sudden he starts talking about sailboats every show, you're going to be like, I don't get it. I don't understand. Like for me, I'm pretty much wearing the same shit I've been wearing since day one. I talk about the same things. I'm the same person. I mean, I've grown, but my brand this is my brand. And if I go out and somebody says, I didn't know that was you. You weren't wearing a hat. Well, that was because that's all part of the brand. But I think you have to have some brand consistency. Absolutely. Like say if when Michael Jordan was the face of Nike, if he showed up at an event wearing an Adidas jumpsuit, people would have shit the bed because he was the face of Nike. And he was always consistent with his brand. So I think you can grow, but you also have to stay consistent at the same time, right?
Well, and you can make these small changes. You're phasing in new aspects of you, phasing in new aspects of your character. So when you're online and somebody's following you for even 5 years, there are going to be aspects of your character or aspects of your interests that they might not know about. But over time, there might come a time where it's appropriate to talk about your favorite TV show, or it's appropriate to talk about your political beliefs, or it's appropriate for you to discuss religion, or it's appropriate for you to talk about sailboats, right? Like, now all of a sudden, Joseph, let's say, and it's the Joseph Graham show. Imagine if he goes on a podcast and he has a guest that is a boat salesman. Now you can talk about sales and you can talk about selling boats. So it's like, it's the best of both worlds, right? But when you're building out a marketing message and saying, for example, my own Addicted to Coffee and Standards, I help public figures optimize and scale personal brands, right? Optimize and scale their personal brands. That is consistent across every single platform. And if you were to follow me, you know that I will talk about personal branding. Now I have the flexibility because personal branding is so broad to where I could talk about podcasting or authorship or speaking or landing gigs or social media optimization, algorithms. I can talk about all these different things and it falls underneath the umbrella, but it's not like I'm going to come out tomorrow and talk about, used car sales and be like, hey, if you want to sell more cars, but if I wanted to ever appeal to that kind of audience, I could say, here's how used car salesmen can leverage their personal brands to drive more sales. See what I did there? So I can talk about a subject that might not be directly correlated with me, but I can at any time change my marketing and be able to reach out to those people. Just like when you're building a business, you don't want to micro niche down to where it's like you only work with dentist offices or you only work with doctors or you only work with car salesmen. But at any point, you could direct your advertisements to reach that kind of audience because you want to attract that kind of client to fill out your books and to fill out your client base and your customer base. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Like even like Alex and Layla Hormozi, a lot of people see them as the fitness guy and girl, but they own now thousands of businesses and doctors' offices, lawyers. They're into everything, but a lot of people just see them as as the fitness guys, or like a lot of people see Shaq as the basketball guy, but they don't realize he owns like 400 restaurants, movie theaters. Every commercial he's in, he doesn't get paid. He wants a part of the business. So he's a businessman, but he's also Shaq. So it's kind of like you're able to do that once you've been in the game long enough and you learn the game, right?
Well,
it's a game. It's a game.
What is the definition of personal branding? This is something that I feel like we should get out of the way. And I talked about this the first time we were on. Your personal brand is you. I am the only Isaac Mashman that has ever existed and that will ever exist. And you are the only Richard Kaufman, regardless of other people possibly sharing your name. You are still the one and only, right? You're the one who came from your mother. You're the one who shared your experiences, were in the military, have all of your interests, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you're thinking about your personal brand being more than just your career, now all of these things are facets and aspects of your personal brand. So for example, you mentioned Shaq. I know that if I'm going to Papa John's and they have the Shaq pizza, I'm going to order that because it's associated with Shaq. I know that if I need a certain, cologne, I might do Old Spice because it's associated with Terry Crews. It's the same thing as like in the 50s and John Wayne and Marlboro cigarettes. It's like, what cigarette brand would you smoke back in the 1950s and 60s? Those exact cigarettes. Why? Because it was an early form of influencer advertising and leveraging a person's personal brand. And so thinking about this now, whether you're going and trying to be the next executive or the next Alex Hormozi or the next entertainer, NBA player, by building your personal brand and showcasing who you are, people are going to latch onto that because people will do business with who they know, like, and trust. This isn't new. This is, frankly, cliche at this point, but it is the God honest truth. And when I was in network marketing, one of the things that was emphasized was word of mouth is the most powerful form of advertising because of that very fact. And that is rapport, that is trust, that is a connection, that is a relationship. And if you can have that relationship with your audience and with everybody who's following you, you might not know who they are, but they know who you are, and they will want to propel you forward and position you in a way to where they can feel comfortable sending people your way or sharing your content or sharing how you've helped them.
Yeah, and I think that's now with social media, I can stand on the top of the mountains and say I'm great. But if Joe Graham, if Eric Allen, if Dean Graziosi, if John Lee Dumas says Richard Kaufman is the guy to go to, then I'm the guy to go to. And I believe that, especially now, you have to have social proof, but you also have to build value in order to get social proof. And,
yes.
And like, unfortunately, I'm a Lakers guy. You know that. I'm a Lakers guy. I'm not a LeBron guy. And and then him bringing his son to the Lakers, it's been a big shit show. Is because he hasn't built any value with the audience. And I think you get a person like Kobe. He was the Lakers. Magic Johnson was the Lakers. Mm-hmm. LeBron will never be considered an all-time Laker great. Just like Alex Rodriguez will never be considered a Yankee. But somebody like Jorge Posada could be considered a Yankee because he didn't build that reputation over time with the fans. So how important it is it to actually build real relationships, not only with the people you have on your show if you're a podcaster, but also the fans that listen to your show.
Well, every single thing you're talking about is building rapport with somebody. So the fact that we both love coffee, need the caffeine, right? Or maybe if you're talking about the fact that you like Lord of the Rings, or you're a Star Wars fan, or that you were in Boy Scouts, or you were a veteran, like, you know, yesterday I was watching part of the RNC, and I've never done that before, but a lot of the members who are running for political office, they started out and saying, I'm a veteran, I'm from here. And, you know, one of the greatest people, his name is Hung Chow, and he's running for office, I think possibly, I don't remember which state, but he started out talking about communism, talking about how his parents were immigrants, and that was what he experienced. And then he went in to talk about how he's a Navy SEAL, and then, you know, his story. And now all of a sudden you have all these layers of who this person is. And it's really easy when you're building out your social media and creating content or thinking about what you create. You can only talk about maybe your career, but you don't talk about who you are, because talking about you as a person is more challenging than talking about you as a professional. It is so much more difficult, because then you're left with, if I talk about this, does it look stupid? So again, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of this content? And there are four main reasons that a piece of content is successful, and that, you know, somebody would create a piece of content, the outcomes of it, so to speak. So a piece of content can entertain you, it can educate you, it can inspire or motivate you, or it can connect you. And if you get a piece of content that can do all four of those things, it can connect you with a guest or connect you with an audience member, it entertains them, and it's educational, and it motivates them to take action. Now they have all these reasons why they would want to follow you and say, hey, I like this guy quite a bit. And so you're thinking about building out your own audience. Ask yourself, what do you want to be known as? What do you want to be known for? And so you might not like LeBron compared to Kobe Bryant, but then you're following in the footsteps of giants. And even Andrew Carnegie, in his book, The Empire of Business, said that regardless of, no, it was actually Napoleon Hill in The Law of Success, if I'm quoting it correctly. And he says that even if you follow in the footsteps of another person, you're still going to be closer to them and having success than if you were to try to pave your own path. Because you can reverse engineer what is effective. Just like Alex Hormozi, you could reverse engineer his content strategy and probably tell that he took inspiration from Gary Vaynerchuk as an example, right? And I feel like this, mentioning Gary was inevitable for this show, just like the first time we mentioned him. But you can reverse engineer those strategies that work, just like you could reverse engineer what I've done to build my own personal brand, and you could duplicate the results. And if a result is duplicatable, that means that it is successful and that there's a real solid strategy there.
Okay, now we've been friends now, like I said, 5 years. Sometimes we fall out of touch because, you know, algorithms and shit, they don't show you the stuff. But I'm thinking it's about 6 or 8 weeks ago, you had a post that just blew the fuck up. I mean, there was hundreds of people commenting, and I think it was for somebody claiming to be a best-selling author, and they weren't a best-selling author or something like that. And it was just about trying to be real without having to come up with kind of fake numbers. And I think that's a big deal right now, because everybody's trying to be the best without actually putting in the work to be the best. Like for me, I didn't start monetizing my podcast until we hit 2 million downloads. Mm-hmm. I didn't want people to say, well, why should I sponsor your show? You don't have any downloads. So how important is that to make sure that if you have social proof, to make sure that it's real social proof and you're just not paying people to say shit about you?
Well, you could talk about how great you are every day of the week, 24/7, every single second of the day, and say, here's why you need to work with me. Here's why I'm the best. Here's why I'm expert. But experts never call themselves experts. Other people call them experts, right? And so you're thinking about, what is this? That is edification, right? And so if you can do things to where other people are edifying you by association. So for example, me coming on your show is a form of edification. Now let's take that another layer. Now, I was also on your friend show, Joseph Graham, right? So I was on his podcast. That is a form of edification by two parties in the same network. So both of you guys, by interviewing me, are edifying me and now have this layer of connection saying, we have somebody in our network that we would both refer people to, right? Yeah. That looks tremendous for me. And that is a privilege, right? Ultimately, that is a privilege to have multiple people in the same network vouching for me. And so whether you're trying to get press articles or land that Forbes feature, you're not going to do that by paying your way in. Anybody can land a feature in Forbes or a high quality placement or an interview, etc., if they have something to talk about that is of value or an opinion. I mean, think about what is politics? Politics is a lot of it is opinions. It's not even fact-based or statistics. It is, I have a talking point or an opinion that I could talk about. Talk show hosts. It's like half of the television in the first half of the day, right? You're talking about Maury or Jerry Springer or The View or any of the, it's all talking points. Half the time, it's not even about expertise. And the thing is, though, these are all individuals that have put themselves out there to where now they are in the public's eye.
Okay, so let's talk about talk shows for a minute because I've been called the male Oprah. I've been called a G.I. Joe Rogan because something that I had when I had David Meltzer on, he left a quote for me and he said that Richard is more interested than interesting. And I was pissed off when I read the quote until I got in touch with him. And he's like, I want you to do some research on that quote. And I think it was written about Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite, saying that a good interviewer is somebody that is more interested in what the other person has to say than what they got to say. Because I already know what I know. I don't know what Isaac knows. And I think that's what makes the difference between somebody like Oprah, where they just sit and listen and let their guests talk, instead of somebody like Jerry Springer, they just talk over the guests. So that's really, I think that's really important if you want to start a good podcast or a good interview show is actually being able to actively listen.
Well, let's reverse engineer Joe Rogan, the most successful podcaster of all time. He is never an expert on any subject. He's not the expert unless it's the MMA and he's talking specifically about that on those specific MMA shows. He is always asking questions and just having a conversation. And so there's no expectation for a guest to come in and think that they're under the spotlight of this microanalysis that Joe Rogan's going to piece them up and break them apart. And, is this guy legitimate? No. A guest comes on and they have a conversation. They have rhetoric for 2 to 3 hours or 4 hours, and they just go back and forth and banter. And then Joe is now one of the most intelligent people because he's had thousands of conversations with no expectation other than let me ask you and let's have a conversation back and forth. Think about that in terms of how powerful that is. And so if you're thinking about how to be the best interviewer, well, let's reverse engineer Joe Rogan. And just like David Meltzer left that comment to you, I think that is your job as a podcaster to ask those questions, unless it's a super niche show talking about branding or artificial intelligence or talking about plumbing or contracting. Unless you're doing a show that you're only appealing to one audience, it is your job to bring interesting people and let them showcase why somebody might listen to that podcast.
Okay, and now let's talk about branding, because like you said, I believe we are our brand. Mm-hmm. I'm my brand. And I've gone out to the show. I've gone out to the store. I'm always wearing my swag. And somebody stopped me and he's like, "You're that guy." And he was like 80-year-old Spanish guy. He's like, "I've been watching you for years." But because I was wearing my own swag, he's like, I recognize I recognize it. But I see a lot of people, they're business owners, they'd rather wear Nike than wear their own stuff. And I think, it depends on the situation, of course. But even, when Damon John came out with FUBU, he wore his own stuff everywhere. And I think people can't, for me, even if I'm watching you on a show and you're wearing a T-shirt, I'm going to look in because I want to see what you're wearing. So, I believe that we are our own brand, and wherever we go, we represent our brand. And I think we are under a microscope, so we really got to watch and say what we do if we're representing our brand. So talk about being your own brand.
Well, why would you wear a billion-dollar corporation's merchandise and not even support your best friend who launched a business? This is one of the most common things people talk about. It's like your friends will be the last to support you and strangers will be the first. And you think about these companies that are branding themselves, they might wear Nike or Reebok or, all of these different merchandise because it looks cool or it's comfortable. But if you really wanted to still wear that brand, what you could do is get custom merchandise that is a Nike based t-shirt that might have the Nike swoop, but might have your business logo on it, right? Like that, there could be some compromise there, but it is always better to wear an unbranded piece of merchandise over wearing your own, or overwear. It's better to go unbranded than it is to support one of these, big brands, because again, then you're edifying that company, you're associating with it. And it's not so much important for somebody at a small level, but you think about a celebrity that is seen wearing, let's say, Balenciaga or wearing Louis Vuitton, all of a sudden there's this big piece around that online. There's this big chatter and conversation. And so what you can do is you can take the couple $100s and get custom t-shirts, custom hoodies. Like I'm waiting on getting some Mashman Consulting Group hoodies, but guess what? This hoodie is unbranded. I don't have a logo, but this could easily look like it's an Oakley sweater or something. No, it's an unbranded, sweatshirt, because I know that I'm not going to feel comfortable wearing some, brand that basically says, oh, I support this brand. No, I'd rather go unbranded than support a brand. But I'd also rather wear my own brands than no brand at all. And so that's like the perfect thing to wear. If you can get merchandise, support your local business in your town, in your city. And I think online entrepreneurs need to support local entrepreneurs more than ever. Exactly. And that looks good. And you could go to any print shop in your local city and say, hey, I need these made. Can you go ahead and do this? And then when you show up to interviews or you're going out and walking in public, like going into Target a couple of weeks ago, I was recognized going into the store, not because of my brand, but because of my face. But now imagine you're going out to eat, going to events, and you're wearing your logo, you're wearing your social media handle. You never know who you're going to be walking past or who might be following you on social media that you don't even know exists. And that's how you can start becoming that local hero and known on a personal level. And then on a digital aspect as well, you have all these people who are also following you and seeing that brand, and that creates this degree of familiarity. I believe that there's, Richard, a law of familiarity, just like the kid who goes to school on the first day feels all awkward and they don't know who their teachers are, what friends are going to have the same classes, or there's a new kid. But by the end of the school year, they don't care. They know everybody because it is familiar. And you have to get people familiar with you and what you're doing and your brand and your logo and your name and your social media.
And and I agree with that 100%. I've been walking in Disney, and somebody would be like, "Hey, Rich," or like I've been walking in Times Square, and somebody would be like, "Rich, what are you doing here?" I've been in North Carolina with my wife, and just happened last year. We were in North Carolina having dinner. Somebody comes up to the table, "Hey, Rich, how you doing?" She's like, "How? We're 800 miles away from home. How do you know people?" And I said, because I'm a relationship guy.
Yeah.
I'm a relationship builder. And even because I know a lot of podcast guys that once a guest is on their show, that's it. You don't hear from them again. You don't see them again. Where me, we've been friends for 5 years now. And you may not see me all the time, but sometimes I'll be like, "Isaac, brother, what's up, dude? How are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
So talk about building relationships, because that's what's going to keep you in the game long term, instead of just being in that game for that quick hit and then you're out the game.
Man, I've been compiling a document that has all of the different places that I've been interviewed, and I was going through some of the people in my network and my Facebook messages in particular, and there were some shows that I forgot I was even on because I haven't heard anything from these people over the past couple of years. Nothing at all. And I think about to where now I'm getting refamiliarized with them and what they're doing. And I'm like, do I even want to reach back out to them and see about coming back on their show? Maybe not. And relationships are one of those things where it's a two-way street, where you're naturally providing value either by being a shoulder that they can cry on, or being somebody who can educate them, or how you can just share your experiences and have a conversation back and forth. And again, you find these degrees of similarities or even differences, and differences can be just as powerful as similarities, because now you can have good conversations and rhetoric back and forth. And it does require time. And, I have a best friend in Jacksonville, and I'm living in Little Rock, Arkansas now. And I told him, his name is Kevin. And I told him, I was like, man, I'm afraid that by not moving back to Jacksonville, our friendship might dissolve or might not be as strong as it could be. And we've been friends for over a decade. And he's like, don't stress about that. And something I've learned from my military friends, and this is Kevin speaking, that those relationships require not only the person who might be in the military to maintain that relationship, but also the person on the other end. Don't worry about that. Distance doesn't matter. We're still going to be putting in that effort. And then when we are in person, face to face, it'll be like nothing's ever happened. I'm thinking to myself, wow, yeah. And sometimes it requires you to let go of your ego to be that person who reaches out and follows up. Sometimes you get busy. People aren't thinking about, they have hundreds of people in their life that are asking them for something, or, asking for money, or asking for advice, or trying to talk to. And you have all these different things going on, to where, who are you to think that you should wait for somebody else to reach out to you, right? And you need to let that ego go and maybe reach out to them first. And then all of a sudden you realize that they've been so busy, but they've been missing you, but they just keep putting it off. And then you can pick up like nothing ever happened, like no distance ever occurred.
But, I've been following Gary Vaynerchuk probably since 2010. So now we're going on 14 years. And something that I learned from him is my first 3 hours of my day is I wish every one of my friends a happy birthday through direct message. Mm-hmm. Not selling anything. And you've known it. I've done it. I'd be like, Isaac, bro, it's your birthday. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. And then I'll post on their public feed. Mm-hmm. And then also I spend the first 2 to 3 hours every day replying to comments and actually being social on social media. Because I know it made a big difference to me when I had John Lee Dumas on the show, and I get a direct message from Dean Graziosi, said, I loved your show with John. Great show. I love what you're doing. And that was like one of the only times I've talked to him. But that made a difference to me when somebody reaches out, not wanting anything, just saying, hey, happy birthday, or hope you're having a great day, or I seen your mom died. I'm so sorry. I'm here for you. That makes a big difference in relationships when you're not just there trying to sell something, but you're building those relationships online and also offline. So
or more importantly, what can I do for you to better support you? That is like a golden question that I've actually started asking my fiance too. Like I try to every day and say, hey, do you need me to do anything for you today? What can I do? And that is you think about what place does that come from? It doesn't come from a place of expectation. It comes from a place of service, right? And that place is missing expectation, which means it's genuine, and it is something that is emotional, right? And so what can I do to better support you? And then a lot of times they'll be like, there's nothing that you could do, but I appreciate you asking. And they'd be more likely to ask that same thing of you in the future. Be like, hey, what can I do to better support you? And so there's this degree of respect that gets built, because it's really easy. I mean, think about how many times, man, you get a friend request and you get pitched immediately, whether it's a virtual assistant or it's a genuine person. Like lately, I've been to the point now to where if somebody pitches me on a service too, that I know that clearly, if you were to follow me for any minute or look at my profile, you would know I didn't need. I'd be like, seriously, you can do better than that. And I'll call them out, or I'll delete the friend request, like whatever it is. But the people who are genuine about their relationships, and it can be difficult too, especially because if you're thinking about building a business, sometimes you might be tight financially, or that you could really use that sale. But then you have this degree of desperation. And if you're desperate about things are, you're forcing your way into success, and success does not like to be forced. It likes to be nurtured. And it's much easier to nurture a relationship than to force a relationship.
Okay, so I want to dig a little bit deeper on this, because now with Chat GPT, AI, I'm starting to see that the more real you are, the quicker you're going to get ahead. Because if I see a post and there's certain buzzwords that's going to be in that post, I know that was all ChatGPT AI written. Or if for a while, and I made the mistake, I was just using AI for all my thumbnails. And then I started to realize, wait a minute, everybody's doing that. So when I have your thumbnail, it's going to be your face smiling or pointing.
Absolutely.
Because once people realize, okay, there's a lot of fake shit out there, now I'm going to be looking for the real. So talk about, how I think, like, I use AI every day, and I use it as a tool. I don't use it as a crutch. But I think old school plus new school will equal success. But if you're just going straight AI nowadays, you're gonna get thrown in the gutter because everybody can know it's fake. So talk about branding in 2004, because I think it's the 6th month of 2004, and a lot of every other post is AI. So talk
2024,
about,
brother.
So yeah, we'll talk about that. I know you love the subject. I know you love it. That's why I was going to bring it.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about which direction I want to take that conversation. And I'm thinking about the merge of old school and new school in terms of online entrepreneurs need to be offline more and offline entrepreneurs need to be online. There's a balance of you should be going out and shaking hands with people next to you in your city, right? And you can leverage your local network and your local, and I've been talking about this all the time, to get a crutch and a level up online. So for example, if you go to your Chamber of Commerce and you do a speaking event in front of 20 or 30 people, you could film that, leverage that, package it, promote it digitally, and land more digital gigs while having a strong local network. People want to see you win, right? So that's one example of old school with new school. When you're talking about artificial intelligence and leveraging, whether that's ChatGPT or image creator or DALL-E or even an AI that can help create music, all of these things are not meant to do the heavy lifting. They're meant to be a supplemental spotter for you, right? If you're thinking about lifting weights on a bench, you need a spotter there to make sure that you're good and to give you a leg up and to help you out if you need it. And so if you're thinking about the use cases, for example, building out graphics, rather than trying to take and search hours for a specific graphic I can use, I could go into Bing or go into the image create and say, hey, I need a geometric background that is black and white that would be used for a social media post for an education-based company. Hit create, it can create an image. I could say, all right, this is good, or tweak the prompt. But then I take that graphic and I don't just post that as is. I would use that as a background, adjust the transparency, and make a social media post with an image that's entirely unique. Or if I'm writing a press release, I can have ChatGPT help me structure that press release, but I'm feeding it the information that it needs in order to write an effective press release. So I can't just say, write a press release about Mashman Consulting Group, but no, I'd say, I am looking for a press release talking about the launch of a new headquarters location in Little Rock, Arkansas for a new business, Mashman Consulting Group, that provides personal brand consulting for public figures with emphasis on optimization and scaling. And I go into detail. It takes me a couple minutes to write the prompt, and then it can take, all right, Isaac's already included a quote. I can insert the quote here. I can provide all this information here. And now I have a fully structured press release that isn't cliche because I'm directing it on where it needs to go. And so if I see somebody who has a social media post, it's like, are you feeling stuck in your business? Are you lacking motivation? Get up and change your sleep schedule. Say affirmations in the morning. I'm thinking to myself, what in the world? And Richard, the thing that helps people stand out now is strategic, tactile, tactical advice. People want real information. They don't want the appetizers anymore. They don't want the feel-good stuff. They want the meat and potatoes. They want to actually know how you can do something. And so if you're using AI, let it be your spotter with what you're doing. Let it take some of the weight off of you, but don't rely on it. So just like my videos and my reels, all of my videos now are going through an AI generator that captions it, uses the emojis, uses the zoom feature, all of that. A couple of years ago, I would have had to pay a video editor $50 for 1 or 2 videos. And now I can pay $10 a month and either have a VA create my videos for me, or I can go in and take the time now, because it doesn't take much, and have that video created in a couple of minutes. And that is efficiency. But again, it's not doing the heavy lifting because I'm still creating the video, but I'm not having AI generate some video that I'm posting. It is still my face. It is still me. And, again, people know, like, and trust somebody and are more likely to click on a picture with my face than an image that might have, for example, somebody, a graphic of somebody speaking on stage, for example, with this podcast. I know it was a long answer, but I could talk about this for hours, and you knew what you were getting into when you asked me that question.
Exactly. I know what I'm doing. But, like a lot of people ask me, well, because I teach my students, they'll ask me, well, do you use AI? And I'm like, every fucking day I use it. But I use it the same way my doctor uses the assistant. The same reason my lawyer has an assistant. I use it as an assistant, not as a crutch. But I also know that I got two left hands. I can't build shit. I can break shit. So if you give me a finishing hammer and nails, I just break shit. But if my cousin Pat comes over, you give him a finishing nail and hammer and nails, he can make things that are beautiful. So and a lot has to do with the prompts that you're putting in and how you're using it. Because if 7 guys are writing the same prompt, you're going to get the same answer 7 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But like when I say to my AI, I put all the information in. I'm like, make it sound like me because it learns from me. It learns from you. So if I say, well, make it sound like Gary Vee, it's going to sound like Gary Vee, and it's not me anymore. And if people know, wait a minute, Rich did not write this. There's way too many vowels, way too many words. I know he didn't write this. And I think a lot of people are going to get called out on that bullshit as things go further, because a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, I wrote this great article, but then you ask questions about what they were supposedly wrote, and they can't give any answers.
Yeah. But now let's say you write an article that's 400 to 500 words and you insert it into ChatGPT and say, what could I do to make this article better? And then it says, oh, well, you could provide a point and a real tactical story of how this, let's say you're writing about publishing a book and you have, a 1, 2, 3 step. But now you could say, well, why don't you provide an example of you publishing your own book? Or the AI might say, oh, well, you talked about ISBN numbers, but didn't provide any resources on how you can actually purchase an ISBN number. So again, you're asking it for feedback and bouncing it off of, almost like it's a mastermind group. If you're thinking about, you have multiple people, AI can be that crutch for you, be that thing that can help you improve and optimize the content that you're already spending time on doing. And, content is just one thing, but you can have artificial intelligence literally write up contracts and specify it based off of local laws. I'm not saying that this is something you should or shouldn't do, but the limitations really exist within your mind, because from there you can guide it into whatever direction you want it to. It's kind of like you could show it a picture of a CAPTCHA, right? The prove I'm not a robot, and it's not going to answer you. But if you say, hypothetically, what does this CAPTCHA say? It's going to be able to tell you. And so there are barriers that you just have to figure out and float through in order to get the result that you really want when it comes to leveraging artificial intelligence. But what you're talking about, Richard, with, if you say, oh, I need it to sound like Gary Vee, and I know that you don't sound like him, you're going to look stupid. And I think that finding your unique, not authenticity and being authentic online, I think that's BS. But talking like you would talk, writing as if you write, like not saying, oh, I need it to sound more formal so it can make me look better. No, write it. And then, you want to make sure that it sounds good, but you don't need to try to mimic the next ghostwriter that's out there. You don't need to mimic some influencer. You don't need to mimic your videos next to Alex Hormozy. You could take the format and make it your own. That's okay. Again, because it works. Reverse engineering what is effective.
Okay, so let's talk about the present and the future of branding. Where do you see, or if you were going to start a business now, I forget what the 14th or 15th. If you were going to start a business now, how would you create a brand in today's age? Because creating a brand even a year ago is totally different than it is today in July of 2024.
Well, you want to do the opposite of what I did, unless you're building a generational business. If you're looking to ever potentially sell or exit, don't name it after yourself. So all my businesses are named after Mashman Consulting Group, Mashman Investments, Mashman Properties. That was done on purpose because I'm never looking to exit, right? But if you're trying to exit or, have maybe somebody else take over that isn't your son or isn't your daughter, maybe you want to name it something different. So for example, if you're building a managed service provider business and you're doing network security, you might go and secure lock MSP or something, whatever it might be. You need to find a way to package it to where it explains what you're providing. So it's creating answers and clarity versus more questions. So with Mashman Ventures, if we're thinking about my previous business, it was a public relations firm that had a consulting business model in personal branding. That was a lot to say, and that wasn't as clear as it could have been. So I knew that I needed something to make it easy to understand, which is why I launched Mashman Consulting Group. We're a consulting firm that offers personal brand consulting. Like, simple, right? I don't need to go into much more detail than that. Now, when you're looking for a name, it needs to be available. So you'd want to make sure that you're not fighting with 100 other people for a similar name. So you would go to opencorporates.com, you would go to your Secretary of State, you would run a Google search, and you would see if there are other businesses that share a similar name. If there isn't, you have the green light, so you could go. You want to purchase your domain. So mashmancg.com, mashmanconsultinggroup.com. That was one of the first steps I did when launching this new business. You need to secure the same social media handle that is the same as your domain. So it's at MashmanCG all across the board. And if you think about why you'd want to do that, you want to create a seamless brand to make it easy to promote, easy to know, and easy to remember, right? So mashmancg.com, you can follow the firm everywhere at MashmanCG. And then you could get into the nitty gritty that isn't even as important, which would be the logo and the color scheme and all those aspects. But having the name, the direction, and the visibility are great. And then you could also think about, okay, what do you want the brand to be like? Do you want it to be a luxury service? Do you want to be, a mom and pop? Do you want it to be a boutique? And, then you can adjust your branding and how you market your company as such. So if it's a boutique local business, you could make it a little bit more hipster and make it more appealing to Gen Z and younger generations. But if you're building a traditional business, you might want to, make it more appealing to middle-aged people. And so having traditional calls or things that would instill confidence, such as, a logo with I'm thinking about the woman who during World War II was like, we can do it. It's like, you might want to do callbacks that would be, inspiring strength and inspiring confidence. And the logo from there, do you want it to be a cursive font? Do you want it to be a bold font? Do you want it to be more corporate? And there are so many questions that you can ask yourself, and it would be wise that you might want to hire somebody to consult with you so you can identify these things ahead of time and maybe spend a couple weeks building out your brand before you decide to launch. I think that's a smart move. And I think that where I really specialize in is the personal side of things and helping with your personal brand. And we could have a really great conversation, Richard, about how you can leverage your personal brand to grow your business.
Yeah. Like for me, it's podcast has been around 6 years now, and it's only been since January that we've went to Vertical Momentum Media Group Incorporated. So now we're an actual S Corp. So we're actually a corporation, but it's taking 5 or 6 years of having interviews like this, and senators are saying, I got to figure something out. It can't be just going willy-nilly. Like I didn't realize, I knew, but I didn't know that all my social media had to be consistent. Mm-hmm. So like if somebody Googles Vertical Momentum Podcast, we're on the first 8 pages of Google, but it's always the same logo. Until I didn't think about it until somebody says, what does a Nike swoosh looks like? I'm like, everybody knows what that looks like. Yeah, but it's all over the branding. It's the same, maybe a different color, but it's the same swoosh. Yes. And for me, that's where I dropped the ball. So I realized maybe I'm a businessman, but I'm not a good businessman. So I had to go through a total rebrand just in the last year alone, because I didn't do the things that you're talking about. I was just doing it willy-nilly.
And we could easily go in and I know, like, for example, in a consultation, something right off the bat that I would recommend you do is right now at the top of the screen, it says you can email us at verticalmomentumpodcast@gmail.com. Well, why don't we go ahead and get an email set up to where it's podcast@verticalmomentum.com, for example, right? To where it's a custom email domain. These are all the small tactics and all the small things to where even if you're the only person building out your personal brand and you don't have a videographer or a photographer or anybody working with you, you have to have this presence and this it needs to feel like you have a team of a dozen people working for you. That is how you need to position yourself. Or even if you're the solopreneur, your company needs to look like you have a team of a dozen employees in association with your business. Now, is that unethical or are you lying? No, you're not. You are simply positioning yourself. And are you saying from your company page, I would love to work with you, or we would love to work with you, right? First person versus third person. And there are so many different strategies that you can leverage to have what I consider and what I call an omnipresent personal brand or an omnipresent business. You think about Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola is everywhere across the world and every country practically. They are omnipresent everywhere all the time. And so just like you're getting recognized, you have the makings of an omnipresent personal brand to where it doesn't matter if you're in Alberta, Canada, or in Miami, Florida, or in El Paso, you're going to be able to get recognized. And that takes time to work on. And it's not like you have these things overnight. It's taken you hundreds of interviews and hundreds of conversations to get these stepping stones. But then again, that goes back to you have a track record. You have a milestone, just like your credit history. If your credit history sucks, banks aren't going to want to work with you. But if you have a good credit history, you're going to be, more available for opportunities. And a measurement that you can use is, are opportunities seeking you out, or are you having to be the person who always seeks out opportunities? That is the really great measurement of how successful your brand is.
And I agree, because now as long as this is like my 1300 interview, so now I get pitched all the time to be on other people's shows. But now I want to talk about something else, because I find it, like you were talking about, everybody knows Nike. If you ask the average person who owns it, nobody don't even know that it's Phil Knight. Or if you ask who owns Pepsi or who owns Coke, I don't know. But I think a lot of people, once you start a company, we're the face of it. But like my friend Kumar owns a GNC. He's been the face of it for the last 30 years. If he's not there, the store doesn't run. Because if his car's not there, people knows he's not working and they go right by it. So I think before we start a company, we should realize, are we building a global brand, or are we just going to build it where it's just my face and when I die, it's over and it's a wrap?
Well, you have to make sure that it has a culture outside of you. And you mentioned something that is a real risk, to where just like your friend, if he's not there, people aren't stopping by. You need to create the culture to where even if you're not there, people know that they're still getting treated just as much as if you're there. And then you can talk about exclusivity, to where they know that if you are there, like they're having dinner or lunch with like the founder, the owner, like there's a degree of separation there. But you should also instill confidence in your clients, to where I'm not going to be on every single consultation, but I know that if they were to work with my COO or work with any other consultant that we hire over the next 24 to 144 months, right, that they are still going to get the same quality. And that's how you build a brand that extends past you. Because think about how many people are solopreneurs versus business owners. That's something to where if you were to think about Robert Kiyosaki's The Cash Flow Quadrant, you have 60%, if I remember the quadrant correctly, 60% are employees, like 35% are self-employed, 4% are investors, and 1% are business owners, or I might have the final two backwards. But regardless, what's important is the idea of it existing past yourself. So Charles Schwab was named after a man, Charles Schwab. Henry Ford did Ford Motor Company, and it has well existed past his death, right? But you think about these major companies. You mentioned Nike, and not everybody might know who Phil Knight is, but you think about Amazon or Tesla, and everybody knows Jeff Bezos. Everybody knows Elon Musk. Everybody knows Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. Now, if you think about Tesla, you can make the argument that Tesla would not have been successful if it was not for Elon Musk's personal brand, because there was a point to where people would purposely go out of their way to buy a Tesla, not because it was Tesla, but because it was Elon Musk. So now if Elon Musk was to disappear tomorrow, Tesla has a degree of quality and assurance to where now people know what they are getting. They know that what they are purchasing is going to be worth it. And so Elon Musk could leave the company and 100% of it tomorrow, but people would still purchase it. Now, yes, it would take a little bit of a hit, but it's still going to be able to exist even though he might be out of the picture. And now you're getting into high level business and thinking about how if a CEO steps down, how culture might be affected, or how hiring a new CEO, you would need to hire somebody who can instill confidence for investors. And so personal branding is a lot more than just the entrepreneur or the podcaster space. It is every single facet of our economy, our politics, our beliefs, our religion, all of it. Personal branding is like, it's more important than a business brand, in my opinion.
Okay, so but let's talk about it for a second. And brother, I just want to say I'm thoroughly enjoying our conversation. And I'm
Same,
so
an
grateful.
hour has flown by.
I'm so grateful for our friendship and our relationship, but you can lose your audience in a fucking quick minute. I just read before we got on that Jack Black had to cancel his tour because his partner said, I guess something, wish it was a birthday cake. And he says, what would be your birthday wish? And he's like, I wish they would have killed the president.
Yeah.
He had to cancel the whole fucking tour because of something that a guy said. So now that brand is going to go through some serious shitstorm. So you really got to be careful what you say during anything being a personal brand, because one thing, and it can go south real fucking quick.
Yeah.
Like Phil Knight maybe say something and they're like, yeah, well, he's a CEO, but if somebody has if Tom Brady does something like really, really stupid, he could just ruin his whole Hall of Fame career, everything in an instant. So how important is to make sure that you're on your P's and Q's at all times, being a brand and a business owner?
Well, I used to go under the moniker that if it's going to divide your audience, you shouldn't do it or you shouldn't say it. But then I realized that was kind of a weak approach to where, yeah, you might want to talk about a political stance every now and again. That doesn't mean you do it every single day. You might not talk about your religion every single day, but every now and again, cool. Again, that allows you to make an explanation of faith. It's an exclamation of belief, and that can connect you with somebody. Now, thinking about this entire political situation that's happened over the past week, there were so many people that just felt so comfortable saying something so heinous on socials. And they're seeing repercussions from Jack Black. If you were to go to that video and read the comments, people are like, wow, my family's never watching another Jack Black video again. Or let's think about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in 2020. He endorsed President Joe Biden. Okay. He endorsed it. He took a hit because he explained that I'm endorsing Joe Biden. But 4 years later, he said that, if I was looking back, I might not have made that endorsement, but his brand has gone forward because it's not like he was like, I'm endorsing Osama bin Laden. It's like he has his own belief and that is okay. Jack Black posing with Joe Biden would have been okay. But the fact that somebody he was associated with, it wasn't even himself who said it, said that, oh, I wish that the president, that bullet was 1 inch to the right. Now, by association, his reputation sunk. And know what we were talking about, Richard? We were talking about how association can bring you up for the entire podcast. But now this is an example of how it can bring you down. And so Jack Black, what I read was correct, he went back and he said that, that shouldn't have happened, that phrase was not good, but too damn late. Now he's going to spend the next decade trying to repair his reputation. And sometimes nobody will ever be able to look at him the same way. So growing up, it's like Pee Wee Herman, for example. Growing up, I had my grandmother and my mom being like, he is a complete pedophile. He is a complete weirdo. So entering into adulthood, I don't even watch anything with him. I didn't even look into anything about his background, but I have that instilled in my memory to where Pee Wee Herman, oh, he's a weirdo. Same with Michael Jackson. It's like Michael Jackson and kids. It's like, I don't even care anymore because it was just instilled in me. And so you're thinking about every single tactic that you're doing, or every single thing that you're saying, or every post you're making is either contributing to your reputation in a positive way or destroying it in a negative way. And so ask yourself, what am I doing this for? Again, are you educating, motivating, inspiring, connecting, or entertaining somebody? Don't just post to post. Don't just shit post to shit post. Have a reason for what you're doing. And then realize that, it might take a redwood tree 1,000 years to grow, but give me some beers and a couple guys with chainsaws. We could cut that tree down in a couple hours, 100 years down the drain. And that is like your reputation. But then again, and I'll shut up, let's think about Tiger Woods. How many car accidents has he been in? How many drugs has he taken over the past decade? I don't even know. I don't care, right? He's still the greatest golfer, right? And so there are degrees, just like you could make the argument that some sins are worse than other sins, to where some things you can come back to. It's like Jordan Belfort has somehow managed to rebuild his entire life after scamming hundreds of millions of dollars. And now all of a sudden he's a public figure, has a movie, and it's a glorification. So it's like you can usually come back from most screw ups, but there are some fuck ups that you might not ever be able to come back from. And I would hope that anybody listening here isn't going to go down that path. But just know that if there is something and maybe there's something that is hurting your reputation, you could probably get ahead of it and you could probably solve it.
And the reason why I bought it, I was thinking about it because last night I watched the movie Air. It was about Michael Jordan and about how his mother got him helped him get signed through Phil Knight. And there was a part, and they were talking about where at one point one of the local people in North Carolina wanted Michael Jordan to endorse a Democrat, and he said, "No, I'm not endorsing anybody." And the newspaper asked him, "Why are you not endorsing this Democrat?" He said, "Because Republicans wear shoes too." So I think you really have to think about everything, like you said, everything you post, everything you say. There has to be a give and a take. Like if I post, because I'm a member of my town, if I post F Joe Biden or F Trump, I'm going to piss off half the people.
Yeah.
Either way. So for me, it's like, you know what? Like I did a post about the whole thing, and I'm like, listen, if you're okay with somebody trying to shoot a president and trying to hurt innocent people, you can unfriend me now. But I didn't put it one way or the other. I wanted to make sure that people know that I won't accept disrespect. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think we really got to be cognizant of the words that we say. And not only that, but by the actions that we do. But now, again, for your point, what you were saying about how everybody still loves Tiger Woods. I mean, is the greatest golfer of all time. Look at Alex Rodriguez. He got caught doing steroids, and I forget the pitcher's name for the Yankees. He got caught doing steroids, and the pitcher said, Andy Pettitte. Andy Pettitte said, "You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I love you guys." And they love Andy Pettitte. But he got caught doing the same shit, and all he did was come out and say, "You know what? I fucked up. I'm sorry." Mm-hmm. And Americans are willing to forgive if you're humble and willing enough to say, "You know what? I messed up. I'm sorry."
Yes, and there are so many different facets of this conversation, and there are repercussions too for thinking about this is a little bit of a radical, but it's a little bit of a radical perspective and an example to use. But you're thinking about some of these people online that are saying, "I wish the bullet didn't miss." They're teachers, they're leaders in communities, they're firefighters, and all these things. And it's like they're saying these things completely disassociating with human life, because Trump, or any politician for that matter, they're not positioned as a normal person. It doesn't matter how much they try to get on the common person's ground. They are not the common folk. And so there's already distance there to where it's like, oh yeah, he could die, whatever, I don't care. And you're forgetting, like, imagine if that was your brother. Imagine if that was your father. Imagine if that was your wife or your mom, right? It's horrible. But now people are getting fired because of their comments. And there's a difference between, again, like, And then we're entering into like the conversation on a political front of what is free speech versus what is treason, right? And I would say most of these things are probably treasonous. And guess what? Me even making this comment on this post, and I know what your audience is mostly made of. I'm pretty sure everybody listening, to a large degree probably agrees with me. But me saying that, thinking that he should have been shot is treasonous turns off other people. And I know that whenever I make that post, though, or whenever I make that statement, that I am making a conscious decision to where I don't care if you were to unfollow me or anything, because I stand in my beliefs. And so, yeah, Richard, I think that you can come back and the American people, and I think anybody, they are forgiving, but they don't like being lied to. And so a good example is if you were to be an athlete, or I think about Liver King, who, is all on the feeds. And then he comes out a year ago and he's like, I lied. I am on steroids. He was not able to recover his brand because he, on multiple occasions, said, I am not on steroids. So he was front face lying to everybody who was following him. So it was too late for an apology. Versus if he never lied and said that, I'm not going to answer that, and then comes out with an apology and says, yeah, I am. That's different. So again, like and this is why, people who say that, oh, personal branding isn't real, or this is all concepts, these are all made up. If that's the case, why are there civil suits for hundreds of millions of dollars for defamation? You think about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, the defamation trial that she lost. She made statements that cost him a lot of opportunities in his career and a lot of negative press. And so this goes to a very high level to where statements do in fact matter and do in fact have consequences. You can have freedom of speech, but know that your freedom of speech can have an impact on another person's well-being. And this is why managing your reputation, or in the case of giving endorsements, should be done very cautiously. Because by giving an endorsement, you are saying that I am basically vouching for this person. So if you were to buy from this individual because I gave this endorsement and it was fucked up, it now falls on me. It now falls on you. So I would always be in the boat of receive more endorsements than you give. Mm-hmm. Receive more endorsements than you give.
And for
me,
me,
going and vouching for Celsius or vouching for Audible or Amazon or any other sponsor, you're vouching for that company.
Yeah.
And that's why doing due diligence is also important. Just like if you were to hire somebody, you want to make sure they have the licenses. You want to make sure they have professional insurance. You want to make sure they have good reviews. You don't want to sit at the 1-star buffet. You want to sit at the 5-star diner, the 5-star steakhouse.
And I love that. And then for the next couple minutes, I want to hit on something else. But people that have been following me, they know that I'm in recovery 35 years. If all of a sudden I start promoting Ciroc and I start promoting edible CBDs, they're going to be like,
wait a second.
The fuck are you talking about? You're talking about being clean and sober, but all of a sudden you're taking pictures with Ciroc and eating edibles. You're like, so you just lost 6 years of everything you just talked about, just went down the shitter. So, let's talk about, for the last couple of minutes, podcasts, because I believe podcasts are the new radio. I haven't listened to the radio, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. When I get in my car, it's either an Audible book or it's a podcast. But you decided to go, when you launched this new venture, you decided to go on a podcast tour. Why is that? Where you could have went anywhere else. You could have did book tours. You could have did TV. Why did you choose the podcast route?
Well, Richard, I'm doing all of those things over the next 24 months. So I'm already starting to nurture and look into local television opportunities and things there. And again, leveraging local media to grow my digital presence and my digital reputation. But podcasting is not the killer and destroyer of radio. I don't believe so. And it's funny because I was listening to a show with Rick Rubin, an interview that he was on with, I believe it was Bedros Keuilian, and he was talking about how he actually prefers the radio because it means that he doesn't have to come up with all of the choices for what to play. And I've actually kind of adopted that because sometimes it is stressful to think about what should I listen to? Maybe you just want to turn on the radio and whatever you get, you get. So I've actually started to go back to the radio like an old man. It's interesting. You're the old guy doing the young stuff, young things, and I'm the young guy doing the old man things.
Yeah.
It's weird. But podcasting is a way for you to get exposure in front of new audiences. And again, you're getting edified by every host that you're having a conversation with. And a great reason why you would want to consider doing podcasting as well. A couple months ago, I was on a show with Eric Triplett, a great guy, great contractor, one of the best guys in the aquascaping business and building koi ponds, and just brilliant guy. A field that I would never be in. But he has a podcast and he talks about how general contractors can, get more business or, improve their businesses. And I came on and talked about personal branding for contractors. And a week later, he messages me, he says, Isaac, there's somebody who is having a conference later this year in October, and he might be interested in having you come out and speak. I wait a couple weeks. I say, perfect, just let me know. He makes an introduction with the owner of, a relatively large company who has products in like Home Depot. And next thing you know, I'm getting flown out to the conference in Denver, Colorado, October 22nd and 23rd to speak at Atlantic Oasis conference. How did I land that opportunity? A podcast. Why? Because it was an opportunity for me to disclose my expertise. It was an opportunity for me to show my speaking ability, having emotions, talking about my personal story, and also strategically getting in front of potentially hundreds of thousands of people in that individual's audience. See what I'm doing? So podcasting is a fantastic way to establish yourself as a public figure, to cut through the noise. And that is why I'm going to be on 100 shows by the end of 2024.
Makes a lot of sense. And because you never know where it's going to take you. I mean, who would have ever thought that I'd be able to hang out with Sharon Lechter, David Meltzer, Robert Kiyosaki, just by having a show. But the only thing that, and I tell, like when you signed up for on my calendar, there's a question in there that says, do you promise to share your episode?
Mm-hmm.
Because, if it takes a podcaster, a good podcaster, it might take 8-10 hours to book you, to do all the research, have you come on the show. And I've had a lot of people that have come on the show, they don't even share their own episodes. And I'm like, yeah. So you just came in to use the audience and then you got the hell out. So I think that's one thing I love about you is every time you were on the show, you shared the shit out of it. But it helps me, but it's also helping you, showing that, okay, this is me and Richard. This is me and Eric Triplett. This is me and so-and-so. It's building your brand by sharing your episode. But a lot of people don't think like that.
No.
So I think that's smart that and you're not only doing one kind of podcast. You're
Mm-hmm.
not just doing the entrepreneur, or the branding podcast. You're doing the one with contractors, the one with somebody building a fish pond, pools. You're doing different things. So you're going to get a wider variety, right? So that's part of your strategy.
Yeah, and that's the thing, though. Once you have a skill set, you can appeal to a wide variety of people and a lot of different, like, for example, personal branding and the skill set that I possess, I'm able to help you whether or not you're a model, you're a Playboy model, and I probably wouldn't work with one even if I had the opportunity. Again, who you're associating with even as a client, don't take the money if it hurts your brand. But I could work with entertainers, I could work with business owners, I could work with dentists, lawyers, everywhere in between. So I've been on, in the past couple of months, contractor podcasts, a franchise podcast. I've been on coaches and coaching. I've been on startup founders and corporate CEO kind of, more white collar podcasts. I mean, I'm just thinking through things that I have booked, out. Some are sales based, and I don't care because I'm able to talk about my expertise in these things. And I'm also able to share a little bit more of a personal aspect and a personal side to me, just like, on the Joseph Graham show, when I was talking with him, we ended up talking a little bit about my personal beliefs and faith and things of that, because it correlated with principles and it showcases other aspects. And so, yeah, I mean, Richard, podcasting, I think, is a fantastic vehicle. And I think that you shouldn't necessarily start your own show unless you're going into it with the long haul. And that is something I would say that might be counter to what some other people would tell you, because everybody has a podcast in 2024. I mean, we saw this coming. We said this a couple of years ago. Everybody has a podcast. Well, no, in 2024, literally everybody has a podcast. And so you need to go into it with the end in mind and saying, all right, I'm not just going to do 20 episodes and have 20 listeners and be a statistic. I'm in this for the long haul, at least 12 months, right? To where I am committed to doing this episode every single week at the same exact time, having interviews or having monologues and promoting it and publishing it. And I'm committed to the damn thing. Because otherwise, you might as well just save your money. Don't buy the microphone and the fancy headphones. Why don't you just go and get on other people's podcasts and share them out? I think starting by going on other people's shows and then seeing if you even like that format would be a good first step before you decide to make that investment and actually start your own. Okay,
so from your perspective, because I'm actually going to share this out with some of my clients. What is the difference between a podcast host and a good podcast host? And I'm going to share this with my students, so it's not coming from me. But what is the difference between, because you've been on a lot of them, what's the difference between a good host and just a regular podcast host?
I have been on a lot of podcasts in the past 24 months, especially the past 6 months. There are very few that I would refer my clients and make introductions for. It's kind of a crazy thing to think about. Why would I promote and make an introduction to one podcaster that I wouldn't with the next guy? How they promote their show. Are they also posting it on social media? Are they taking clips of it? See, for example, any episode that we do together, you always clip it, post it, promote it, tag me, all of it. Versus being on a show and they only post it and it's on Apple and Spotify and Amazon. That's it. Whoop-de-doo. They don't do much in terms of promotion. So a great podcast treats it like a business. They market it. They split it into a bunch of different forms of content. They have distribution on how many channels are you on? 35 plus?
35 plus, yeah.
Exactly. Versus, let me just go ahead and do what my host provider says. Because most people who have podcasts don't realize that they could also go for international distribution and get on JioSaavn and Ghana out of India, or iVoox out of South America. They don't realize that they could submit it to Pandora and that they could also be on Audible or TuneIn or whatever other places that it would be, and having guest profiles. They don't know how to submit that through Apple Podcasts. But those are all of the minor techniques that help a show stand out in this entire sea of people with microphones. And that's the thing. Again, it's competition. And the person who's just creating content online is not going to have a successful personal brand when compared to the person who is treating it like an actual business and positioning themselves as a public figure. So those are the main differences between a podcast host and a great one.
All right. So one last question, because this is a teaching podcast, and this the text message that came over from a guy. His name is Frank. Frank asks, he says, Isaac, I want to start a business in now. What would be your top 3 pieces of advice that I can take and start running with?
Okay. Well, number 1 would be finding a unique brand name that you're not competing with somebody. You might not want to call it, if you're doing a landscaping business, 123 Landscaping. That's stupid. But you could have a local appeal. Do you want it to be a local business? Do you want it to be a franchise? Do you want it to be an international chain? Ask yourself those questions, because from there you can position it as a local business versus a national business. So there are some, companies that, for example, a bank is a perfect example. There are, local banks like First Community Credit Union out of Jacksonville, Florida, and then there's Wells Fargo, right? And so there, again, local versus national. And then I would find something that is unique from a name standpoint, just like I talked about earlier, Richard, with having the domain available, having the social media handle available. And then number 3 would be, are you wanting to be the face of this business? And if so, and I would recommend you do this, how are you going to start driving traction towards that company? So let's say you are launching let me just think about a company. Let's talk about electrical company. Okay. Let's say you're wanting to start your own electrical company. You could go on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else and start recording content talking about what electricians get wrong, or what you can do in order to troubleshoot before you call out an electrician. And you could do all of these things that position yourself as an authority in the electrician space. So now people who are following you, and they might be in your local area or they might not, they know that you are somebody that they could trust in terms of their electrical needs. And it sounds goofy when you think about that, but a lot of times when we talk about personal branding, we associate it with these internet like media agency companies, when it also applies to the local blue collar businesses. Like, you can still build out your personal brand and you could have a blue collar business, but also realize like these blue collar businesses are more recession proof than these internet based companies. Because if it's tough times and there's a recession, the laundromat is going to always need business, and people always need their dirty laundry, folded and washed, but somebody might not need consulting. So it's like having those traditional companies and traditional tactics might be the way to go. So that's what I would say. I would say, ask yourself, is it local, national, international? Finding something unique and marketable that you could get, and then putting yourself out there as the face of that business and marketing it and driving traffic as the authority.
Okay, because one thing I see a lot of people fail at, and I felt part of this when I first started out, that I tried competing on price.
Mm-hmm.
And having T-shirts, hats, and coffee. I can't compete with Black Rifle. I couldn't compete with, whatever. So I am no longer the cheapest. If you want to hire me as a coach to get your podcast, I am not the cheapest. I'm very expensive. And I think because when I talked to Alex and Layla, they said, it's one thing they said, they're like, there's something to be said about the most expensive, and there's something to be said about the cheapest. Because when I was with GNC, if I had a pre-workout that was $100, and I had 5 pre-workouts that were $100, and I had 1,000 that were at $5, those 5 would be gone before the $5 ones would be even off the shelf, because people were like, there's got to be a reason why it's more expensive. Mm-hmm. So I think if a person's going to start a company, instead of Frank's Blow and Go, maybe Frank's Landscape and Creation, landscape design and creation, you can, even when you're just starting out, if you have a name like that, you got to have the backup, obviously, but you can charge a higher price than if you're just Frank's Blow and Go, where you're just going to be cutting grass, going from one thing to the next, right?
Well, let me give you an example of somebody in my network. He was a previous client of Mashman Ventures. His name is Alberti Ortiz, and he has a landscaping company around Fort Lauderdale, Sunview Landscaping, if I remember correctly. And his business is not the cheapest. They do a lot of landscaping where they're actually planting and bringing in the palm trees and adding the rocks and adding the liners and the grass and edging it and paving it and all of that stuff. And he does before and afters that show. And it's like, we're not the cheapest, but we're going to be the best. And, again, it's like anybody can consult per the hour, but not everybody can consult based off of the results. And like for myself, I charge $1,000 for consulting. Like, if you want to get me on your calendar, I'm going to be $1,000 for a consultation. I don't care if that consultation's an hour and a half or 4 hours. You're going to leave with the answer to your question. And we're going to strategize. We need to strategize to get you the result with your company and with your personal brand. I'm not charging $250. And Richard, I've had so many conversations, and the people that I charge $250 or $500 always create more stress than the client that has the expectation of higher ticket. And it's not that you do it because you are thinking, oh my God, I'm worth this much. I'm the best. It's not coming from this egotistical place. It's from this, I want to work with the best. I want to be associated with the best. I want to provide the best results. Let me make sure that I'm going where I fit in. And so it's not like I came out with $1,000 as my price tag. I remember in 2019, I was doing consultations for $20. $20 for a consultation and charging per hour. No, this is not some massage parlor. Like, no, this is a premier consulting service. And that takes time for you to develop. And again, without testimonials, without verification, without results, and without you knowing that you can duplicate your results, you're not able to do this. If you cannot duplicate your success, you should not be charging for it.
And I think, like even Russell Brunson said in this trilogy series, people that pay attention. So what's going on? How do we find you? How do we support your mission? What do you got coming up in the next, say, 60 or 90 days?
Well, Richard, my main focus right now is taking on more clients of Mashman Consulting Group. I'm working with public figures, whether that's a podcaster, an author, a business owner, to optimize and scale their personal brand from the minor tweaks to the high value strategy. You can find me literally everywhere at Isaac Mashman, going to my website, isaacmashman.com. Also working on the second edition of my manifesto, which I will be spending a lot of time on over the next 90 days to get this ready for a launch before the end of the year. And that's pretty much the gist. I'm launching a new show, but not here to talk about that just yet. So a lot of really great things, and a lot of delegation is going to need to take place for me to make all this happen. But I'm excited about it.
I love it. So guys, make sure you check out our show. Make sure you check out my brother Joseph Graham's show. It was an awesome episode. Should be dropping soon enough where Isaac's on there. I think we'll probably be dropping these about the same exact time. So guys, I just want to say, I want to thank Celsius Energy. And like I said, my book is available now. It's a #1 bestseller. I'm not saying it. Google's saying it, so don't give me any shit. But if you buy the book, autographed copy for $30, you get $1,000 worth of bonuses for buying the book for $30 autographed. And that's including coming on my show, promoting your business, me doing a Facebook post for your business, a Facebook ad for your business to get you promoted for $30. So guys, if you want to get taught how to get a real podcast, that's actually is upwards of 3 million downloads now. Let me know if you guys are interested. I'll get you that information. Celsius Energy, thank you so much for keeping me going. I got 5 more interviews, so I need all the energy I can get. And I just want to say, Isaac, my brother, I'm so grateful for your friendship all these years. And I know that if I have any questions about branding, you're the guy that I always go to. And I'm very humbled and grateful for our friendship over all these years.
Likewise, Richard. And thank you for inviting me back to talk about MCG. And sounds like you and I need a consultation on the books too.
I love it, bro. And guys, make sure you follow him on all the social media. I didn't even realize that he's on TikTok too. So make sure you follow him on TikTok also. All right, guys. I love you.
Everywhere, brother.
Yep. And remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Isaac, my brother, have an awesome week. And I'm gonna text Joe right now and be like, guess who I just had on my show?
Gratitude to you, brother. Have a great day.
Be good.